Moons of Madness is fairly straightforward as modern narrative-focused horror games would be. Straddling the line between a walking simulator and an explorative mystery game, its focus tends to shift to mood and narrative while keeping the player on edge, even though it narrows down your path, but still giving players just enough choice to feel like holding W isn't the key to victory. It offers up a few decent puzzle challenges, plenty of lore, and knowing exactly when to strike at your fears. It plays up the natural anxiety towards survival, loneliness, mental stability, and the fear of the unknown, as any good Eldritch horror would. As long as you're not looking to literally fight back against the cosmic ores with anything beyond your wits or the occasional button prompt, those not clamoring for combat should have a decent time on Mars. But that's not all you want to hear, is it? While I don't want to outline the entire game, I will probably end up discussing certain scenes and the ending, so spoilers ahoy. If you want to go in blind, the game's only running about $20, and has a few solid hours of play. If you're already interested, head out and come back when you've finished. Otherwise, stick around as we watch Funcom again use the Secret World IP in a way I always thought was a better idea. Yeah, did you not know this was another Secret World spin-off game? It's pretty tough being a Secret World fan these days. Ignoring the tragedy of the Legends relaunch and the severe lack of updates yet again, the MMO might feel dead in the water, but the IP has always had a ton of potential. It might seem like Funcom is relegating TSW to the wayside while it tries to force out a half-dozen Conan games because they need you to play them, but what they've done with the TSW spin-off so far has been showing good potential for the IP's future. I'm going to go over what got us here now, so I'm going to drop that skip-ahead timestamp up here. If you don't care to hear recaps of The Park or Hide and Shriek, both games that I have done videos on already, so it might be redundant for some of you, but I feel it's a little bit important to cover. October of 2015 gave us The Park, a very much walking simulator-styled game taking place in Secret World's Atlantic Island Park before the events of the MMO. Taking control of a mother looking for her lost son in a corrupted amusement park, the game was met with middling reviews for its slow start, but it does pick up a bit later despite some unintentionally goofy scenes and the child's too stupid to live attitude. It does falter with an ending that baffled anyone not familiar with the MMO, but it does tie into a pretty cool event that happened that year. Worth a look for a couple hours of your time, but try to nab it under $10. October of the next year gave us Hide and Shriek. About 2 years after the debut of Five Nights at Freddy's and the height of that game's fandom, Funcom once again dove into the Secret World IP with a jump scare simulator that had a pretty interesting twist. It's a multiplayer 1v1 sports-style game where you and your opponent attempt to find and collect colored orbs to bring into your pedestal while trying to cast your jump scare at an opponent. The catch is that both players are invisible, so you'll need to use your hearing, magic traps, and keen powers of observation to find out where the opponent is to outscore them and win the short 10-minute matches. It's the most tertiarily connected to the Secret World, taking place in a location not in the original game, being a rival school of Innsmouth Academy. However, the game went from a fairly low $5 to being absolutely free, so if you want to try it out, hop onto Steam and get in a few matches before spooky season wears off. That brings us here, to Moons of Madness, the first Secret World game not developed by Funcom, instead being sourced to another close-knit developer, Rock Pocket Games. While this had a few of us in Grindstone worried initially, the well-crafted trailer and news that Scrivenomancer would be writing the game, a former lead writer for the Secret World who helmed the game during what I would consider its absolute heyday, at least managed to alleviate my fears. So the potential quality of the story didn't concern me, but we still had yet to see what Rock Pocket was going to have us doing. Luckily, my initial tweet expressing my desire of what the game might be turned out to be more or less exactly on point. So let's get into the oily black tendrils of it all. The graphics are about what you would expect from a middle market title, and with the bloat of AAA market lately, yes, I'm going to consider games closer to middle market as indie because Lord knows everyone else does. Anyway, yeah, Unreal Engine. It does the job, giving that isolated and sterile base a great contrast with this harsh red desert of Mars surface itself, rendering both of them in fairly impressive detail. Not everything looks 100% though, as some of the textures and filth tendrils have a serious anti-aliasing problem. Framerate dips are also very common, at least on my machine, and most often seen when loading assets into the next area. The greenhouse section is especially rough, being one of the most open areas at the start, having plenty of effects and causing my normally 60 frames per second to drop to 40 or lower during most of the area. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but this game absolutely hates being streamed, or at least using Streamlabs OBS. Some patches have gone out here and there, but unless it gets sealed in coffee limbo again, I'll just say it's a fairly smooth experience overall. Still, HUD effects are effective, and the screen may go blurry or red in dire situations, or the occasional black tendril will creep into view from the side as a straightforward warning of maybe you shouldn't be standing here. Simon Poole takes up composing duties again as he did in the Secret World, so the music tends to play up the atmosphere, and works on building a scene more than stealing it. Expect the usual near-silent droning instruments and a thumping heartbeat percussion to set the mood more than drive it on its own. Backing tracks you'll hear in this video are from the Secret World though, because I really couldn't find any from the game. What's much more noticeable is the game's voice acting. As while there are very few VAs taking on quite a few roles for the game, all of them do a pretty fantastic job of conveying the right emotion and spouting believable line reads. Well, all except for Shane, who's your main character, even though he's not by any means terrible, as he's stuck to random context of what you're currently doing, it can be rather amusing to hear his tone vastly change depending on what you've entered. It's unintentionally hilarious hearing the terror in his voice after having seen his coworker's corpse attached to a wall, and then immediately switch gears to being mildly irritated to having read over an NDA. Shane does some very believable exclamation of shock, anger, or fear when one of the many tense situations befall him, but conversationally his tone is lacking. It sounds more aloof than invested most of the time.
Okay. Elevator's not working. Someone must have borrowed a power cell. Declan, I'm heading up to the perilous rocky pathway. Power cell for the elevator is missing.
But yeah, he can sell the high emotion.
Okay, come on, close! Close, you piece of shit, close! Ha! Yes! Fuck you, you plant piece of shit!
Playing the game is a bit of a cross between a walking sim and a puzzle exploration game, with plenty of things to read and investigate. All the action is first-person and prompt-based. You're gated off from a lot of the areas fairly often, though certain areas offer up more to explore or consist of a maze-like structure to make your way forward not as clear, but for the most part you're being led down a very specific path for much of the game. Things that seem like they would be interactive may not be, and everything is dictated by visual prompts that have to be found to use. It's kind of obnoxious watching Shane effortlessly scale large rock shelves and pull himself up to otherwise inaccessible places, yet squeezing past a door or scaling a misplaced crate is completely out of the question. There's also no jump button, so you're stuck to walking, sprinting, crouching, and clicking on objects. Anything not immediately clickable may be used with the game's biogauge mechanic, something that's tied to most of the puzzles in the game. Essentially serving as a status menu, this Wistworn MacGuffin is all you need to interface with the hundreds of different tech options around the Mars base. A right-click sends out a pulse to scan the area for interactables, sometimes showcasing a pathway, and most often connecting to something with a minigame-style screen, where you'll be solving most of the puzzles. What's weird though is how often the game changes its mechanics up without any prior introduction, which was the source of many of my deaths in the first playthrough. Sometimes your biogauge is just taken away, and the game will make odd use of the thought-to-be pointless zoom-in or focus key to infuse orbs with the power of purple. Other times you'll be grabbed by a creature and a previous unseen prompt will appear with no indication on how to act with it, likely resulting in a death. To save anyone the pain who didn't know about this specific part, center the prompt on screen, then left-click before it vanishes. There is no way I'm getting back all the time I wasted here, but maybe I'll save someone else the headache. The puzzles themselves aren't exactly Myst-level stuff, but not everything is a match-the-colors kind of insulting challenge either. A lot of these can be pretty clever, and interact with the environment and objects in the room in more ways than you would expect. You might have to look carefully around the room, find some codes, or even pay closer attention to the objects you've already collected. It's probably what I enjoyed most in the game, but I honestly wish there was a lot more of them. There's a minor hint of a survival aspect to this game, but it's nothing overly pressing. Basically, any surface excursion will require you to place on a suit and keep your oxygen topped up. Unless you're constantly getting lost or taking far too much time, it's not super likely you're going to run out of air, but it does add a bit of pressure and tension to the game that will likely already have you on edge. You'll learn pretty damn fast how to operate an airlock properly the first time you remove your helmet without pressurizing the chamber. There are plenty of other ways to die in the game that will be far more pressing, like standing in harsh environments for too long, getting caught by creatures, but the one that bothers me the most is this seemingly erratic way the game will handle fall damage. Your immersion should remain fully intact with the crunch of your legs and Shane's pained screaming, but whether you die, take damage, or have absolutely nothing happen to you seems woefully inconsistent. I swore there were times that I took a fall that would seem lethal and just barely survive. There were times I took a lengthy fall where nothing happened at all, and times where I seemed to barely fall 5 feet and landed screaming like a soccer player and forced to restart from a checkpoint. Just look before you leap, but don't expect the same result every time. I think the story's handled pretty well, the setup is fine and the beats are fairly concise, flowing together pretty naturally, Eldritch Moonspeak notwithstanding. I don't want to go over literally everything, because fully spoiling a narrative-driven game is kinda jerkish, but I will be spoiling more than enough. If you're convinced to play by now, here's your second chance to bow out. It's a pretty high-spirits day on base. The crew of the Cyrano is set to arrive with supplies, and a change in routine is exactly what this tightly wound crew needs. Most of the crew's been suffering from strange dreams and a shared delusion of an entity that they refer to as the Witch. However, a morning quake jolts a lot of the equipment out of order, and it's your job as engineer Shane Newhart to fix the many things that went wrong as a result. However, the day starts heading from bad to worse as a routine check on the greenhouse reveals and unleashes unimaginable horrors, culminating in the kind of ending you would expect an Eldritch horror would finish with, especially one from the perspective of an Orochi employee. Secret World references are abound, but you're not exactly going to need as much of a connection to the game to enjoy this one. Sure, it helps to be more familiar with the filth, as this game isn't going to tell you anything specific about it. You might be wondering what the hell Anansi, Manticore, Plethron, and any other number of name-dropped Orochi subsidiaries have to do with anything, or just what the hell a Gaia engine is, all but guaranteeing that non-Secret World fans might be puzzled, but it does better to immerse new players into the role of someone who hasn't experienced these things before, even if knowing how things usually turn out for Orochi employees would better prepare you for the ending. The end does have a very small choice involved, neither of which is going to turn out well for Shane personally, but each have their own achievement attached, so maybe consider dooming the universe at least once if you're going to go for the 100% rating. The game at least knows how to do its intensity correctly. There are some real nail-biter moments, and they don't all have to do with being chased by monsters. Personally, I think a certain walk that you have to take is the most existentially terrifying moment in the game, and it goes on for far longer than you think it possibly could. The creature interactions by proxy do get a little goofy and video gamey near the end, but it still knows how to keep you on edge the entire time without relying too much on jump scares. This, at least minute by minute, is far more jump scare focused than the park, but it still uses them in effective ways, at very well timed and not predictable moments, which is pretty much an art form. There's a fine mix of having forced camera turns shove a face in the way, with sudden sounds or movements in the background that you can never be quite certain that you really saw. It's almost scarier when they seem to set them up with a quiet cramp moment and then never really give you the payoff. You know, like any YouTuber does a video about jump scares and then suddenly gets really, really quiet. I'm not the kind of guy who's gonna do that to you, though. It's just cheap. No. Seriously. I'm not. Plenty of the story is contained in background details and logs, but it's a much better experience to take your time and peruse through a lot of these. You can find out about the mission, your crew, the fact your team leader murdered her military squad after a mission, that Declan is a drug addict, that Ina's reckless, unchecked science experiments were responsible for the deaths of over 1,000 people, and that Lucas is a fucking serial killer, which will go easily unnoticed if you're only skimming for codes and unlock commands. Breezing through the game otherwise only take a few hours, and you'll be missing a lot of the overall point. I do wonder why they went with the cover-up angle, even though it's pretty on-brand for the Secret World. The game takes place in a fairly far future, and manned Mars mission doesn't seem completely out of place in the timeline. I honestly thought the game would take place in modern day, as the Secret World well established that Orochi Corps is more than technologically capable of funding and equipping such a mission in secret. Why the Antarctica front during a time that space travel would seem more plausible? Who are they seriously going to convince with this YouTuber-tier green screen setup and script? Brr. Oh boy, I sure am in Antarctica right now, and definitely am outside doing science stuff. Penguins! I love how this game handles foreshadowing. It's the kind that's done perfectly right through dialogue and set pieces, where not knowing what's going to happen has all these tells reveal seemingly nothing to you, but a second playthrough has them staring you straight in the face with a knowing smile the whole time. One of the first interactable objects will seem silly and out of place when you first use it, but you'll end up staring at it in horror the second time around when you realize what it's representing. I'm pretty curious about the massive changes in the story compared to what was shown in the original trailer and gameplay. Declan's name was changed from Orson, the helmet is more vision restricting, hallucinations were a lot more direct and common, the Mars mission wasn't being run in secret, Shane's relationship with his family was a lot different, and set pieces from the game are in a different order and occurring for different reasons. I'd love to know why we got such a departure in the story's direction, and while I would have liked to see what the initial vision was, I can't really tell you what I feel would have been better. I can appreciate that name change at least. Naming a sci-fi character Orson is just so hacky at this point. Despite the generally short amount of time you'll be spending with it, I find Moons of Madness to be fairly priced for the overall experience, and it's a lot of fun to revisit, if only once again. Naturally, Moons of Madness earns its Go rating from me. It's exactly what I wanted from another Secret World spin-off title, and again, I am more than okay if this is the direction they want to take the franchise in. Hopefully we'll see another one of these sooner than it took for this game to finally arrive. It already feels like it's going to be far too long, even if another spin-off game seems a lot more likely than we'll see a major update for the Secret World ever again. Yeah, I'm still bitter. Alright, time for my long overdue shout out to the second most patient patrons ever. My extreme thanks once again to all my patrons, with special shoutouts to my high-level patrons, Neander, A. Smith, Sonic Rose, and Kaizme. Much appreciated your sticking around this long. While I may not have a very predictable schedule here anymore, if you're new to my channel and you can tolerate what you've seen, consider subscribing. If you already are, I much more highly suggest following one of my Twitter accounts of your choosing, be it my personal account at ChaosD1, or my stream and show announcement account for IndieStop, with a 1 for the second I. Yeah, that's trash and I'm open to suggestions there. Streams, as always, are found at twitch.tv/ChaosD1, where I'm at least a lot more likely to appear if I'm not actively working on one of these episodes. If I can find a way to tone these the hell down, you should be seeing them a lot more often eventually. 'Tis the ad season, after all. Also, I'll get around to these suggestion episodes eventually. I feel like I might be missing out on some gold here, but all these games aren't going to play themselves. I mean, except if it was like an idle one.